Well, hello, and good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Pat Escate. I am the organizer of Ann Lister Birthday Weekend, which was supposed to be held in Halifax this weekend, and sadly for all of us, because most of us are stuck in our homes, we had a little plague to deal with. But cheap promo shot. We will be back next year, April 11th through the 18th in Halifax. So don't forget to make your hotel reservations, because this year there were many people who had a hard time trying to find a room towards the end. So you have plenty of warning. This afternoon, I'm delighted to have our next two guests with us. And the reason I'm delighted is in the entire Gentleman Jack community, of all the chat groups and pages and whatever that have popped up, Leanne and Mary are two of my very favorite people in the world. I have absolutely loved their podcasts from day one for a variety of reasons that we'll get into during this conversation. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mary Schwartz and Leanne Mertz. Hey, you two.
Hey, Pat.
Hi.
How are you this afternoon?
Good.
Pretty
Excited
stoked
to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's life? How's life in isolation for you two?
I think Leanne's in a lot more isolation than I am right now.
Yeah, Mary's still deemed an essential worker. I mean, she is an essential worker. And so I've been home I haven't left the house today. We left yesterday briefly, but yeah, we're pretty locked down in Los Angeles.
Right. Remember when you were a little kid and you'd pretend that you were going camping and you'd like lock yourself in a closet for a while and think, well, this is really cool. Well, this is the adult version of that. So here we are. And let's hope
As with all adulthood, it's less fun.
Yeah.
Well, some parts of it are more fun, Mary. Come on.
Well, that's very true. Depends on who you're locked up with, Pat.
Well, there's that. So let's, I'd like to dive into the origin story of Mary and Leanne and the podcast. But before we get there, we need to talk about how each of you found Gentleman Jack to start with. So who'd like to start? Raise your hand.
So I'll take it. I actually found, I think Amanda Walgrove said this earlier, I found Gentleman Jack through marketing. So I have a rather long commute every morning, not right now, but I previously had a long commute, and every morning there is an intersection that I always get stopped at. There's never like, I get the green light and I can go right through. And in April, I guess, there was a huge Gentleman Jack billboard. And every morning I would get stopped at this intersection and I would see it. And it was the one where you could just barely see Ann Walker's face. And the tagline is "Write Your Own Story." And every morning I would say, God, I gotta look that up. What show is it? And I'm trying to do a better job of not being on my phone while I drive. And so finally, I would forget about it until I saw the billboard the next morning. And finally, the day I looked was the day the show was airing. So I watched the show in my bed on my iPad alone after my wife had gone to sleep. And I was hooked. I was hooked after the first episode.
Wow. Yeah.
So I was watching it in real time as it aired.
Well, and I have to say that you must have, I think you were at the location of the only billboard that HBO put anywhere for Gentleman Jack, you know. So HBO, if you're listening in on any of this, get your shit together for next year, okay? Enough already.
Yeah.
Mary, go for it.
Yes. So we were watching the last season of Game of Thrones, and there was a trailer for Gentleman Jack between the end of a Game of Thrones episode and the on the next episode trailer, and just the trailer was obviously gay. I mean, just obviously. Yeah. And as soon as I saw that trailer, I remember grabbing a hold of Nicole and I was like, that show is gay. We are watching it. And I put immediately in my iPhone a reminder for the night that show came out, because it was at like 10 o'clock. And Leanne can vouch, I am in bed by like 10 o'clock Eastern time. So I stayed up late to watch this show, and I watched it in real time as well. And I remember watching the show and immediately thinking, I need to find all the other lesbians and talk about this right now, immediately. Because it just, from the second I first saw the trailer And just like Leanne said, from the second she saw that billboard, you just knew that this was a story. This was our story. It was a story about us. And it was something that it just was so compelling right off the bat from the first second you came in contact with the material about it.
Right.
I think that this is a really interesting thing about Gentleman Jack is that it's not one of those water cooler shows like Game of Thrones that everybody in America is watching. It's not even like the L Word Generation Q, which we knew was coming. They had been promoting it, and you know, the lesbians were all like, "Ooh, that's coming out. I want to watch that." Everybody found Gentleman Jack pretty much alone. A lot of us had partners who wouldn't. My wife notoriously would not watch it when I first started getting obsessed with it. And so I think it's a really important thing that we all came to the show on our own, which is why the fourth wall breaks were so effective, because I didn't have anybody to talk to about it for so long. But Ann Lister would look at you look at the camera and you were like, she gets it. She knows I'm here, you know? And so I think that this is going to come up in our discussion of what led us to create the podcast and why the community that has sprung up is so important to us, because for a lot of us, we had this like energy that we wanted to talk about this show with people, and there were no people to talk about it with.
Right. It just drove people online. It drove people to find other people, and thank God the people were out there and they found each other. So the two of you in your own little separate lives, not knowing one another, you're watching Gentleman Jack, you're looking on the internet, you're trying to find people to talk to, you found people to talk to. How did you find each other?
So I'll start again. I, just incessantly need to talk about movies and television. It's a compulsion that I've always had since I was a little kid. And when I started watching this show, I remember at the end of the second episode, there was a promo for the third episode. And as we all know, what happens in the third episode is incredibly gay and amazing. Yeah. And the promo for episode 3 that aired at the end of episode 2, like cut them closing the door and then jumping on the bed. It cut from Ann Walker going, "Will you stay all night?" to the door cutting and then getting on the bed. So it was like, I was totally drawn in. And I remember I was like, well, I need to talk to other people about this show. I'm going to get on Tumblr. And I had this kind of defunct Tumblr that I never posted on and I just lurked on. And there were no GIFs of this show. And I know, Pat, when we first spoke with you, I'm using the word GIF, G-I-F, not gift, although the show is a gift.
Yes.
They're the little brief, like 30 frames of a show or a movie or whatever that move ever so slightly. And so I needed to talk to people about it. I just started making GIFs and I started using Tumblr as a way to post about the show. And then that kind of went on through the series, and then Mary showed up.
Yeah. So I went to all my old haunts. So I had been in fandom before, but I had been out of fandoms for a really long time. And I was just immediately trying to find other people to talk to this show about. And I went to fanfiction.net, which is now kind of dead. It's now more archive of our own. And I was perusing LiveJournal and all the and people who've been around fandom for a minute will be with me when they say, yeah, I know all these places, I've been there. And there's nobody talking about Gentleman Jack. So I eventually landed on Tumblr, which I had been on before, but hadn't ever really used as like a blogging platform or anything like that. And I ended up there because that's where I found people who were talking about it. It was the only place I could find people online discussing this show at all. And I found Leanne's blog and I had ended up following it. And a lot of her commentary was really, really similar to my style of humor. And she was, how everybody's got their little Tumblr, bio. It's like 30-something female, married, all this kind of stuff. So she was obviously at the same place in her life that I was, a grown woman, married, having a fangirl freak out over a TV show the same way that I was. And I had been, wanting to do something about my interest in this show that was different than I had ever done in any fandom before. And so it led me to message Leanne about it.
So I want to make mention of something here for the folks at home, that when we talk about, because I do know that we have people from the UK listening, because we do. You may not know this, but when Gentleman Jack aired in Great Britain, they had 6.6 million people tune in to the first episode because it was Sally Wainwright and it was Saran Jones. Huge pop. In the United States, we had, because we're bigger and we're the best at everything, according to our president, we had 440,000 people show up.
Yeah.
6.6 million versus 440,000 people. So I'd like for all you Brits out there to give us a little bit of credit for digging this deep to find anybody that would watch the show with us. So here are the two.
Yeah, that's
of you.
fair. Well, and I had already watched Dr. I mean, I had known who Sally Wainwright was beforehand, but I hadn't seen much of her stuff. But I had already watched Dr. Foster, in fact, recently, prior to Gentleman Jack. So when I saw Saran Jones in the trailer for Gentleman Jack, I immediately knew who she was. So that was another draw for me. Because Dr. Foster, while an extremely dramatic show, is an excellent show. Like, it's well written, it's well done, and Saran Jones is powerful in it. So it was a good draw for me to watch the show as well.
Okay, so you found the show, and now you found each other on Tumblr, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, which is like the most back-end internet meetup ever.
Yeah, right. I'm surprised it's still there. I mean,
it's very strange. We all have a love-hate relationship with Tumblr. I'm so embarrassed that this is how we got our start. I mean, Tumblr, the nice thing about it is that you're anonymous. And so I never planned on my identity being revealed. I just wanted to talk about this show that I found so layered and exceptional and super gay. So obviously that was a huge draw. But people started coming out of the woodwork to talk to me. I just would get messages all day long from people who agreed that this show changed their life and wanted to talk about it. And then one of the messages that I got from Mary was from Mary, who said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? Is that something that you'd be interested in?" And she was a complete stranger. She didn't even have a very active blog, so I couldn't even kind of piece together who she was as a person.
I didn't know a profile picture.
Yeah, she had nothing. I mean, it was like very strange, but I just had this feeling that if this is somebody who's saying, I want to talk about this show.
Right.
And I felt like there was such a need for a podcast because Mary and I are both big podcast fans.
Right.
We set up a phone call and started talking. And after talking to Mary for like an hour on the phone, it was clear that we really got each other and that we were the type of people that could talk about deep stuff with funny stuff. And like, that's just the rapport that we have where we can transition from like really deep and heavy stuff that we don't tell people that often to the fangirliest, like eye wink.
Low Pony and Lister.
Yeah, Low Pony and Lister and what that does to us. And
or Sophie Rundle's face.
Yeah.
Right. So you were, I'm sorry, I have to admit to you, I had a little message come across about a little technical difficulty that was going on. So I missed a little bit there. It sounds like you jumped already into starting the podcast, but you didn't start the podcast immediately. I mean, you met each other, right?
We started the podcast 1 week after our first message.
Oh, wow.
To one another.
Wow.
Yeah, so we got it up and off. Our first episode was 1 week after our first message.
Oh, wow. That's big. So there you
and we didn't
know one another.
We didn't know each other at all. It was
we didn't know each other
not
at all.
thought out.
We were like, okay, we want to start a podcast. And then both of us asked each other if we knew how to start a podcast. And the answer was mutually no. And so we recorded our first episode a couple days after our first phone call and spent that week trying to figure out how to edit it. And then we went through within the first couple of episodes, and you'll hear the sound quality change dramatically because we bought microphones. We went through different editing software. We went through several different iterations of how to make a podcast before we finally nailed our final concept within the first 3 episodes, I think. By episode 3, I think we had everything ironed out, but we just cranked that first sucker out right away. We just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, it has a really wonderful immediacy to it. You can hear the excitement that you're getting in talking about it. You just did a really great job with it. I had no idea that you had only known each other a week.
Less than a week. She messaged me on Monday and we recorded on Friday.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
But we were both, it was that same thing. The need was there for us too, because we wanted to talk to talk to each other about the show. You only get so much interaction with blogging. I mean, people will comment on things, but it's not like having a real conversation where you're really getting to the heart of the issues.
Yes. Yeah. So, and you kind of naturally, it felt like you kind of naturally fell into, well, maybe it's because, as you said, Leanne, you've talked about TV and movies obsessively since you were a child, and you brought that to the podcast. But that's one of the things that I've personally found so interesting about it, because it wasn't just fan chat. It was really interesting fan chat. It was teaching me something.
That's good.
Yeah, that I didn't know.
When I was in law school, I had some undergrad classes that I was like a graduate student instructor for that were film classes. And so I sort of got to hone in on my skills for like setting up clips and teaching people the difference between a zoom shot and a dolly shot. And I think a lot of times with media, we find that it affects us in a certain way and it gives us some emotional response to something. And I think a lot of times people have trouble identifying why they're feeling that way. And so often it's like camera movement or sound or the way the scene is shot. And so I really like being able to have conversations with people where, yeah, you kind of explain to them a concept about filmmaking that maybe they weren't familiar with, or maybe they totally were familiar with and they just didn't have the language for it. Because this really started on my Tumblr blog, because what I had done was broken down the shot of little Anne lying in the bed, I think in episode 6, where she looks like an angel. Yeah. This is like one of my favorite shots. And so I literally gifted like every single shot and reverse shot and talked about how the camera was centered up and all that. And that blog post just like took off because everybody was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I was feeling, but I didn't know why. And so I think that, yeah, that just naturally came out in the podcast because that's kind of what I do when I watch movies, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm going to just ask you a question about yesterday's interview with Sally and Saran, just as a side note. Did you hear them? Because it happened really quickly. When Sally asked Saran, did she remember the situation with Sophie Rundle when they were filming the scene where Anne walks into the room and she finds Sophie Rundle or she finds Anne on the floor, right? All balled up and freaked out. And that at the end of that, after filming that Sophie Rundle just collapsed on the floor. There, she just had nothing left to give, which I found fascinating. So, so you're busy talking about all the film aspects, which was great. And Mary, you really started to kind of poke around the gay stuff issues, as I recall. That was what you were bringing into this conversation. Am I right about that, or had you talked about it beforehand? Was that just a natural outgrowth?
I think that was just kind of a natural outgrowth of it. I mean, I feel like I have definitely a lot of unaddressed stuff in my life where I have absolutely had a lot of and it's stuff that's happened to a lot of people in our community, a lot of family stuff, a lot of, figuring out how to be a gay person with no representation or no guidance in my own life, having been raised in the deep South with, homosexuality is a terrible sin and we don't talk about that. It's not even an option, things like that. And I think that we have a lot of people in our community who deal with that, where it's not only is it not an option, it's abhorrent, it's, terrible, it's hateful, it's all these things. And I think that a natural outgrowth of, this show and of the podcast and of talking to Leanne and of having, another lesbian to talk to, another queer person, gay person, whatever you want to call it, to talk to on a weekly basis is talking about those issues, and not just those issues themselves, but what they can do to you, and how being able to actually have a natural reaction to something like Gentleman Jack is healthy and normal. And I think we see a lot of that within our community is people who haven't had the chance to have these reactions to shows like Gentleman Jack, or haven't had the chance to have those crushes on celebrities or have those things, and have them not only be normal but be vilified. I mean, it's just tough in our community when you grow up and you go through an entire life where you either hide how you feel or you are punished for how you feel. Right. And I think that that discussion is important because it shows people that they're not alone. And I think that that has been probably the biggest thing that Leanne and I have been able to bring out with this is that discussion, because Leanne definitely has a significant number of stories as well that she has brought that discuss what it's been like to grow up with, you know, building relationships with people and having them taken away because of other people's families, you know, and things like that that have, you know,
Right. Your best
anti-gay.
Yeah, there was a situation with your best friend, right, Leanne, in high school?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
There's that one.
We don't have to talk about it, but
I think, but you
I
know
do
what?
think-
I think it's important for people to hear about that. And I mean, not right now, but
Yeah.
I think that so much of what people tell us that they really identify with about the podcast is, you know, and this goes back to what Mary was saying a minute ago, it kind of pours out of us because we've never talked about it with friends before who get it. You know, like I've had gay friends before, but I've never had a gay best friend before. I've never had a gay best friend who was as interested in talking about Gentleman Jack as Mary is, who has gone through similar struggles or has gone through different struggles that are also within the same realm of the things that we have to kind of endure. And so I think that part of what this is, and it is like an emotionally processing process for us also, but just being able to talk about things that are hard to talk about, like that best friend in high school, and for other people to hear about how we are adults going on with good jobs and normal lives and wives and pets and children and whatnot, and that we're still carrying a lot of emotional baggage, and that's okay. You know, like we need to hear that that's okay too, for us to continue to struggle with the things that have happened in our lives.
Right. And I'd like to just step in here for a minute. I've had one or two people along the way ask me what my affinity is for you and your podcast, because there's other things out there. There's lots of other, you know, information media, Facebook sites, etc. And if you haven't listened to the podcast that I recorded with Mary and Leanne way back in October, the thing that attracted me to them to be able to talk with them is I came out back in 1969, the year of Stonewall, and immediately got involved in gay politics. And I'm sorry, Brenda just showed me something. She really wanted me to show this while we were talking to you today. This is from a local in my college town, Bloomington, Indiana. This is actually me over here under this. We are the women that whatever it was.
Men warned us about.
Men warned us about. This was back in my gay liberation days, but we were teaching. We were going to classes for self-defense because for a variety of reasons. But so I was out and I was very politically active back then. And remains so throughout my life. And the thing that I found so interesting about your approach to Gentleman Jack and to your community, to our community, was that you were encouraging people to talk about the same issues that we were talking about 50 years ago. And there is still a need for that discussion. And there's still a need for a vessel for that discussion. And so, as I said to you in that podcast, it feels to me like you have picked up that torch and you are carrying it forward. And I'm not sure about this, but I don't think there's going to be a time in our lifetimes where it's not going to be necessary.
Yeah, I think that this is going to continue to be necessary in our lifetimes. I don't think that we're going to stop seeing a need for us to say that our stories are important and they matter. And I think that this is something that I run into a lot in my own life, not just in terms of, you know, gay things, but in general, that I tend to be a mouthpiece for people who don't want to speak up, even if it's just stupid things like I don't want to eat that. But that steps on a lot of people's toes in a lot of ways. But I think that it's really important that we all realize that there are a lot of different personality types out there, and there are a lot of different people out there who need their stories heard, and they need a place that's safe for them to speak. And I think it can be difficult to find that balance and to find a way to allow people to openly talk and allow people to feel that safety. And it's not always going to work. It's not always going to be perfect, but it's important to strive for it constantly. And I think that's what Leanne and I try really hard to do. And I don't think that's necessarily what we thought we would do when we started a podcast.
Right.
I think that it's what we wake up every day trying to do, is to create a place where people feel like they can go and be heard for whatever it is they need to say. And, you know, it's not going to be that place every day, like I said, but it's what we try to make it. And it's all we can do.
And it's not always easy, is it, running a Facebook group from that perspective with so many different people, with so many different points of view. And I have absolutely seen your posts in there from time to time where you're where you have asked people to, you know, pull back a little bit, remember that it is a community, that everybody has different points of view, and we're all coming from different places, but there's a need to be polite and be careful with that, correct?
Yeah, and I think it's also a struggle because at the end of the day, we wanted to, like Mary was just saying, we wanted to create a safe space. And so I think sometimes we struggle with what you just said, the need to balance the fact that there are a bunch of different people coming from different walks of life with different viewpoints and different experiences. But Mary and I ultimately, I think when we made this podcast, wanted it to be a podcast that we as younger gay people, when we were, you know, like looking to media for representation and looking to find our people in our community, would have wanted to listen to. Like, I make this podcast for 15-year-old Leanne who didn't have this podcast and who didn't have this TV show. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have this also mama bear nature to protect all of the people who may be feeling like that. And so there is a balance that's sometimes really difficult to strike between, I don't want to see any of my lesbian sisters or trans friends or whatever feel like they aren't heard, but it's a learning experience, and it is tough. It's tough.
It's rewarding though, isn't it?
It is. And I do want to say that we could not be doing it without our mods, Saj and Gemma. They're bringing a lot of emotional intelligence and, you know, experience to it. And we couldn't have done it without Allison and Nicole backing us up, our wives, to start the whole thing to begin with. So thank you to the four of them.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, the core group is that we all care about each other and we all want the best for one another. And I think that at times we can drift away from that. We get excited, we get very interested in one thing or another, and we get very down a track that is either Gentleman Jack or something else, and then we forget that people's intentions are good. And I think that the one thing that we can all remember, especially in a community that has been so stricken by hatred from the outside, is that if we remember about one another, that our intentions towards one another are good first until they are proven to be bad, then it would do one another a lot of good.
Right. Right. So your life is really, at least your life away from your regular jobs, is really tied up in this whole process of creating community, helping the community to understand, hearing the community, and taking it forward in media to share with other people. What's your vision for your podcast? Where do you want to take it to? Is it just something that you want to continue just running the podcast, or do you want to take it farther than that? Or
we wanted to take it to Halifax, Pat.
Yeah. We wanted to take it on the road.
We wanted to take it to Halifax. That was the plan. You know, we were kind of using Halifax as this guidepost, like, we're going to get to Halifax and we're going to have this moment of, I don't know, revolution, glory.
Wasn't it just the craziest thing? We got so close.
So close.
Yeah.
Within a month, striking distance.
Yeah.
I woke up this morning to a notification that my flight from Gatwick is leaving tomorrow. I mean, it's not, it has since been canceled, but it was still in my calendar. So that was really depressing.
Same here.
I woke up to my notification being like, your boarding pass is ready. I was like, no, it's not.
I was returning my rental car. Yeah. And I think our entire audience has all that stuff going on their calendars, which is just really crazy. But we got so close. It was, we're looking at it and we're thinking, oh my God, I only have one more month. I only have 3 more weeks. And, and meanwhile, here's this thing kind of crawling across Europe, right? It was, and here it is now. So here we are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to answer your question, Mary and I talk constantly about goals and about the things that we want to accomplish. And I think right now we're taking it like one day at a time based on what we think people need and what the community needs. We have been doing, we had a short-term plan, which was to kind of fill in the gap before season 2 got underway. And obviously that's going to be prolonged now. But it was important to us to go back and talk about the movies and TV shows that were important to us prior to Gentleman Jack and that have been with us throughout our lives, and also talking about things that either we haven't seen that we want to encourage the other one to watch, or that we're getting feedback from the community that a lot of people haven't seen, maybe people who are coming out or coming into this world, like the LGBT media kind of world, a little bit later, who've missed out on stuff. Yeah. And so it's a constant discussion between us of kind of what we want to do and how we want to get there.
Right. Where you want to go. Yeah. Exactly. Now you are, there's a convention that you're going to, right? With the podcast?
Yes. We are going to ClexaCon. It's in Las Vegas. They postponed it to August, as far as I'm aware. There was like a brief moment where they tweeted the dates and then it got taken down. Oh, right. But for now, it seems that it's going to be in August. But we are still planning to attend ClexaCon this year, and obviously, Enlister Birthday Weekend 2021 will be there. Right. So as far as that goes, we'll be out and about, and hopefully we'll have season 2 before too long. But
yeah, we'll see.
We'll be covering gay and lesbian media until then.
Right. Yeah. And so did you, were you surprised? It's the same question that I asked Sally and Saran yesterday. Were you surprised by the reaction?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Siri had something to say. Siri's in on this, apparently.
Leanne and Mary. I'm not sure I understand. No. So were you surprised by the community that sprung up? I mean, you've got a very active group.
I think the answer to that is both yes and no, right? Because I mean, on Tumblr, Leanne had a ton of followers, so the community's already there. Yeah. And I think on Facebook, I was really surprised when we created the Facebook page. It was Leanne's wife who was like, create a group, you idiots.
Yeah, you didn't need a group, you needed Instagram.
Yeah, we were like, with a page, make a group. And we were like, of course, we'll make a group. And then next thing we knew, it was like exploded. I mean, we were getting hundreds of member requests a day, just crazy off the wall amounts. I mean, obviously it's slowed down now, but I mean, it just was absolutely nuts to start. And people were posting tons of times a day. And then they still are, honestly. We get dozens of posts a day about everything you can imagine. We don't, at this point, we don't limit the topics, because what we want to do is create a community, and that has gone beyond Gentleman Jack. And I think that's not surprising. I think what it is again, it's a group of people who just want to find people who are like each other, just like Leanne and I did.
Yeah, they want to hang out, they want to talk, they want to, and the meetups are so much fun. You know, I've had the opportunity to go to a couple of them here in New York, and then of course we had one when Jill came in, but just a lot of fun. And I think that was the thing that I was really looking forward the most about being in Halifax, was actually getting to meet those people face to face. And I'm sure you must feel the same way, right?
Yeah, although I will say that, you know, I think that one of the good things that has happened, if you can call it a good thing as a result of all this, is that I think there was so much longing for that connection, that what has happened is that we've taken the fan interaction and the community interaction to a whole new level with the Zoom calls and people going live. I mean, people in the group started going live at the meetups, which was a lot of fun for the rest of the members around the world to join in and see what was happening and watch the drinking games and all the shenanigans. Right. But since the pandemic and people are kind of confined to their own homes, especially since we were all planning on having such strong connection, I think it's actually offered us a chance to slow down and like see everybody else's lives. Allison and I are calling them fireside chats when we like turn on the portal and jump into somebody else's living room. And with the Zoom call, like yesterday after the your amazing interview with Sally and Saran, everybody wanted to process. It's like there was just this buzz and everybody wanted to talk about Christmas 1834. So we turned on a Zoom call, and it not only did it go like an hour, it went 8 hours. And then there was another one that went like 4 more hours because people want to talk about it. And the cool thing is that you turn it on and people will be doing work or making food. People will post from their beds. I mean, we're actually spending time listening to each other's stories, opening up our lives. And the cool thing about that is I think I would have loved to go meet everybody in Halifax and give everybody hugs and shake hands, but there's something about just sitting down and slowing down and listening. Yes. I think in Halifax, we would have been running around and trying to get to the next place. And this is just like, there's just people who want to talk.
Yeah, I think
the community is still there.
Yeah, I think in many ways this has actually deepened the connection that we have with the people that we consider our community. And I know for me, it certainly feels that way, which is really quite wonderful, quite frankly. So, so next question, and pretty soon we're going to go to questions from the audience. But oh wait, I know what I was going to say. I bumped into the Zoom chat late I had just gone to bed. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I picked up my phone and I saw that people were Zooming, and there was no way I was going to have that meeting in my pajamas, even though Cheryl and Jennifer are laughing right now because that's how I have our ALBW meetings, because one of our co-organizers is over in Great Britain and we have meetings at 6 a.m. in the morning. So in any case, I bumped into that, into the Zoom thing, and I really wish that I hadn't been so completely fried after it, because I really loved that energy that was going on in that. I did go back and listen to part of it from the beginning, and it was such a high. It was really fun to listen to. Mm-hmm. And Jen Carter, if you're out there, how did that feel?
She's in the audience right now.
Jen Carter was MVP yesterday.
I'm sure she is, yeah. I've been to India. I know that wasn't an easy thing to do. So God bless you, sister. How do you come up with your episodes? I mean, now we've moved on beyond the Gentleman Jack episodes, and now you're going to have to wait even longer to start breaking season 2 down. Where do you come up with your ideas?
We started a list while I was out in LA visiting Leanne. So we sat down and we just talked about movies that meant something to us, TV shows that meant something to us, and then we started talking about things that we just were interested in, movies and TV shows that we were interested in, that we wanted to cover, and things that we wanted to talk about, not just from things that meant something to us, but things that we wanted to talk about that maybe were problematic or that didn't represent us in the way we wanted them to. And then we created a giant list. And then every week we sit down and we pull from that list, and we try to create a month that has some highs and some lows, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
I'm cueing Liv that we can start taking questions in a few minutes. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. So you've kind of reached into a variety of things that the two of you were interested in. I'm sorry, I need to get back to the question I'm looking for, and now I know what it was. I want you to describe to me how it was when you two when you met in LA, because you had never met physically.
No.
For how long? How long were you doing these podcasts?
Well, Mary and I started doing the podcast in what, June?
Yeah.
And so by the time we met in December,
6 months.
Yeah, by the time we met in December, we had a joint bank account, like with a joint credit card, and we knew each other's address, social security number, all that stuff, and we had never met. My family thought that was pretty hilarious. But strangely, meeting Mary and meeting Nicole also, it felt really not that strange. Like, I didn't know
her. It was
her.
like we had just known each other already.
Yeah, we just already knew each other.
Did
Yeah.
you like run in slow motion, towards each other on the beach or anything? Or what?
We bro hugged. We bro hugged.
We did bro hug. I got off the plane and I was dying, so I had to go to the bathroom. And I went in the bathroom, and Nicole came running in there. And she goes, "Allie and Leanne are right outside." And I was like, "What?"
We saw him come down, and then Nicole like turned towards us, and Mary just ran into the bathroom. So it was kind of anticlimactic.
I had to pee so bad.
Yeah.
I didn't even see them.
Yeah.
I had like tunnel vision.
Right.
So yeah.
So I know that there are people out in the audience that want to ask questions. Are you guys on your Facebook feed?
I am. I can see the questions.
Yeah, I'm on the Ann Lister birthday weekend feed.
Okay.
Yeah. But I haven't seen many of the questions.
Okay.
It says like 300 comments or something on the thing.
Right. And Livia is reminding me, you guys need to understand something. And I know that two of them are back there laughing, and God bless you both, by the way. I know you can see me. The three of us are so completely burnt out right now because this thing took 2 weeks of constant phone calls and Zoom meetings and interviewing people and all the rest of that. My brain is like a fried egg on the sidewalk right now. So she reminded me where I'm supposed to look for the questions.
Oh, good.
Your text.
Yeah, thank God. All right, so this is from Deborah Torres. Have you thought about how you might document your experience with the podcast and community for LGBTQ plus history and future generations?
I guess I haven't thought of it as being that important that it needs to be historically documented. Maybe I have an underwhelming sense of my own importance. I don't know.
Not a bad thing.
Maybe the community needs to be documented more than we need to be documented. But I do think that it's something that should be. We actually have a LGBTQ historian in our group.
Oh, you do?
Ty, correct?
Mm-hmm. I think
Cool.
we have a couple.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I think that the part of the reason why this community has really grown so much in the first place is because of a lack of a kind of collective history. And I know that's why we initially brought you on the podcast, because we wanted to talk to you about that aspect specifically. I think so much of what is drawing us to the show and to Ann Lister, the person, is that that's something that we've really missed out on, seeing these really complex, complicated women throughout history shown honestly and for all their flaws and all their brilliance, and just like allowing somebody to be that person, like just be Ann Lister, like Sally Wainwright said yesterday. And so I think that so much of what this community is doing is filling in these gaps of all the people that we missed out on our whole lives, like our history and the people who came before us, and giving that to the younger generation to like have as a resource. And so I know that when we were going to Halifax, you had Betty, who's got a video production company, who is going to be documenting that. And so I hope that will go on for 2021. But I think part of what the Facebook group is doing is kind of like sharing experiences. And so if somebody wants to start documenting that so that we can send it to the Smithsonian, I think that would be amazing, because people need to know all of our stories as well.
Yeah, the gay Smithsonian.
Yeah, I totally agree.
This next question kind of ties in with that a little bit, and I want to make a comment about it. This is from Lynn Wolfson Harrell. Do you have a sense of differences in the reactions of older women versus women closer to your own age or generation? And I just want to make a suggestion to you before you answer this question. I would love for you guys to do a podcast where you do have a couple of us older ladies talking more about what it was like, what it took, how it formed us, and what we're doing with that energy at this point in our lives. I mean, it's obvious what I'm doing, but in any case, so Lynn wants to know, do you have a sense of differences in the reactions of older women versus women closer to your own age or generation? This is going to be
No, I think that there's more, I have noticed more reverence given to older lesbians in our group, and maybe this is just what I have seen, than I would have maybe expected is the wrong word, than I maybe would have otherwise thought about noticing. And I've always been the kind of person to, when I see, you know, an older lesbian, be really excited, because it's just like, you know, hey, there's, you know, a future. There's somebody out there that's, you know, made it that far, you know.
Thank you.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're just like, there's a grown-up out there, because I don't still think of myself as a grown-up, I guess. But I feel like, you know, when you see people like Esther Newton in our group, who is a, you know, a butch historian and has laid the groundwork for so many of us to have a history and a representation. And you see these younger lesbians recognize her, know who she is, know her work, and have that reverence. I think that that's a really cool thing. And she is just in there and in the thick of it, like the rest of the younger lesbians. So I don't think that there's a difference in the reaction.
Yeah.
I just think that there's a kind of gratefulness from us kids, I should say, for what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure, Lynn, if I'm going down the track that you were trying to go on, but it brought something up in my head, which is, you know, there is a very different way that older women view the world, and the world of everything that's happening in terms of movies and what's happened with kind of, you know, being able to get married and all the rest of that, because our experience was so different, to the freedom of younger people. And I think it may be hard. You will experience this when you get older. It just happens. It's just an aging process.
I think that we're already experiencing that. And I think what I was going to say a second ago is that in the same way that I think we, you know, there is a reverence that goes towards older women in the group who have sort of been through this, who for a lot of their lives have probably been like hidden and not been able to share their stories. They're coming on and sharing their stories, and people flock to those stories because they're so needed. And the reverse, I think, is also true. I mean, I noticed Mary and I are in a much different spot in our lives than we have some 18-year-olds in the group who are navigating college and things like that. And so there's also like a shared excitement for people flirting the first time and going on dates for the first time. And so it's sort of like we get to, it's super cute. You know, it's been 10 years since I've been on a first date for the first time, you know? And so I think that I'm already starting to see that in my own life, but also part of what makes the group so special is that I think everybody can get on board no matter where on the pathway other people in the group are. It's just like shared encouragement.
Let's see, from Leslie Brown, what subjects do you have in mind for the podcast for the coming year? You want to share any of them?
Well, I think we kind of broke from what we usually do this week. So the podcast we aired today, we literally just talked about coronavirus. We talked about how we're getting through it. We talked about being quarantined. We talked about what we're watching on TV, what video games we're playing, what music we're listening to. So I think that, you know, while we intend to talk about media and how we intend to talk about movies and things like that, I think that Leanne and I are both very open to, as things arise, talking about what's relevant and talking about what is important to all of us in the moment.
I have a question for you from that perspective. Did you have any plans when you were going to Halifax and when you will go to Halifax? Did you have any plans for doing any podcasts from any of the sites there? Had you thought about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I think I told you on our very first meeting that I wanted to just go sit where Ann Walker is buried. I mean, I know we don't know exactly where she's buried, but I just wanted to go sit kind of in that field and cry. Yeah. And so I think that just being in a place, so much emotion washes over you. And so I know that Mary and I definitely wanted to explore that and go deep and find some of our gay pain that I'm sure would just spring out of us. And in addition to the things that, you know, Mary said about having movies and media planned for the podcast, we have talked about bringing in historians. We have talked about Gentleman Jack effect on a wide scale and the things that we're seeing. And we've talked about all these different ways that the show and that the people involved in the show and the people in the community have continued to impact our lives. So those are all things that, I mean, we have like a million Google Docs with all these different ideas. And it's just sort of a matter of sitting down and doing them at the right time.
Getting them all in the right place, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the creative things you have seen in the Andom? What are some of the creative things you have seen in the Andom that really speak to you? I have to tell you that I loved, is it Marlene Mori? I can't pronounce her last name.
Yeah, Marlena.
Marlena Mortati.
Mortati. The painting that she did of Anne in the excuse me, low pony Anne in the vest and the shirt from when she was 17.
Mhm.
That one that she came up with like 15 minutes after that that first photograph came up with. I thought that was fabulous.
Yeah. The art in the group is fabulous. Marlena is awesome. I got to see Chantel's like full arm sleeve dedicated to Mariana in person. So that was amazing. We love Bika Pop's art. I mean, I think that everybody, and Amanda Walgrove, the thing that she's doing, I mean, the things that she's doing, everybody is putting their creative like skills to good use and being willing and brave to share it with everybody. I mean, we have people who are writing fanfic for the first time. We have people that are posting songs that they have composed. We have Sam, who's like a brilliant songwriter and singer. And
Good Morning, Helen.
Yeah. Good Morning, Helen. I mean, there is so much stuff. Every day I wake up and there's something new that's exciting that somebody is doing and sharing with the group.
So Leanne, you actually do work in entertainment and in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been curious about, what do you think about, do you think that HBO is really aware of what's going on out here?
I think that if they are, they haven't capitalized on it enough.
Big time. Yeah. It's stunning. It's really stunning to me that they have not promoted the show.
We'll see what happens for season 2.
Yeah, I know, but boy, you know, they got magic in it. They've got lightning in a bottle, and they're letting it just sit there.
I think that we are definitely an untapped resource.
Yeah. So we have to
for sure.
find them.
I mean, we're available if HBO wants to give us like one of those post-show recap shows. We will be there in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Let's go knock on their door together.
Yeah.
Let's have a talk show, HBO.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Perfect. Okay, how do you keep up with all the, oh yeah, this is really good because there is so much new stuff surfacing. You know, a shout out to all of the people, all of the historians, all the people that are working on the transcriptions for all of the new information that's coming up, not only in the diaries, but what's coming up from digging into the archives.
The Anlister Code Breakers.
Yes, and all the things that we're finding out about what really happened to Ann Walker. Right?
Yeah.
And so they're asking, how do you keep up with all the new stuff that's surfacing?
I can't.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's literally impossible.
Yeah.
I can't keep up with all of it. It's incredible to see the posts, and I try to read as many of them as I can, but I can't keep up with all the new information. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, before Gentleman Jack, we had 3 main historians working on this project, right? Ann Choma, Helena Whitbread, Jill Liddington. You had 3. And now you have hundreds of people across the world transcribing diaries daily. We're finding out new information literally daily. There's no possible way to keep up with all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And figure out what's going on. And while it's amazing, I mean, there's just no way to fit to every single day keep up with every piece of news.
Well, and I also want, at this point, I want to give a shout out to some people that many people would consider outside of our community, if you're only thinking of it as the people who are in the various Facebook pages, et cetera. But there are 2 people in Halifax, 2 men in Halifax that are have spent an inordinate amount of time in the archives. One is David Glover. The other is Stephen. I can't remember Steve's last name. And if, for any chance, David or Steve, if you're listening, I'm sorry, because it just came into my head, that have gone through the research, who have dug out the papers, have gone through the Lister archive, have reached out to the law firm that Ann's lawyer was part of, that is still an active law firm, to go through their files, to actually come up with the real stories of what's happened there. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that when you all come to Halifax next April, you need to know that a good portion of what happens at Ann Lister Birthday Weekend this year and next year will focus on those kinds of things. We have worked very hard making connections in Halifax with people who are going to take you to these places, talk to you about these things, show you the articles from the archive, really give you a deep dive into the true history of Ann Lister and Ann Walker. So please pay attention to that, because we have some great stuff for you when you come next year.
I think I wanted to add in one thing, which is that I know at whatever point Mary and I decide to circle back to Gentleman Jack and kind of pick up, and we'll do, we'll recap the predictions that we had for season 2. Both of us called Christmas 1834, so that's happening.
Yes.
But I think at the point which we do circle back and jump back into Anne's life, because we've kind of stepped away from that for right now, I plan on crowdsourcing, because I know that there's going to be so much material. And so we will be reaching out to the people who are doing the transcriptions, who know it better than anybody now. I mean, not better than the 3 that Mary mentioned and Sally, obviously, but the people who are really digging into that material, because like Mary said, it's too much for us to keep up with.
Yeah.
Even the books that we've read, the books that have been published, there's so much more than that we're finding out now. So we're going to have to start making sense of it with a whole bunch of different Google Docs at some point.
Right, because there's just so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we are actually, thank you. Steve Crabtree. Steve, there you go. Thank you, Brenda. Steve Crabtree is the other gentleman that's been doing all the work in the archives and has come up with this. Boy, I'm so sorry we didn't get there, because they were all prepared to talk to us about this. Okay, so we are actually growing very close to the end here. And oddly enough, the last question that is sitting here is, you both predicted that Christmas 1834 would be on season 2 to the episode. So they want to know, what are some of the other predictions you might have about season 2?
You can go listen to our predictions podcast. We have a whole entire podcast of season 2 predictions, so we can see how many more of them are going to come true.
Yeah.
I'm still sticking to, I want the hayloft scene.
Yeah.
From the honeymoon.
I think we both agreed in our predictions episode that we wanted to see a lot of Ann Walker at Shibden doing, the scenes around the breakfast table. And Sally and Saran alluded to that yesterday, that the only time that Sophie Rundle was even shooting at Shibden was in the opening scene that she has. I mean, that scene where she meets Anne in episode 1, and then when she comes back in episode 8 to get Anne's address in Copenhagen. And so I'm really excited to see what the chemistry is when they're sort of at home. Domestic Anne's.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, domestic Anne's.
Yeah.
Domestic Anne's number 1.
Yeah.
Yes. It was a little nervous making when Saran was talking towards the end yesterday, when she was talking about the hilltop scene and how that was kind of their dream. That was sort of their fantasy. They'd been apart for so long. They truly did love one another, and that kiss did happen, but now we're going to see what happens in the aftermath. So
yeah, but for the next 8 or 9 months or however long we go, we can just, before the new stuff comes out, we can just keep rewatching the hilltop scene.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, listen, Mary, Leanne, it certainly is always a pleasure to talk to you, and I really thank you for taking the time to come on to ALBW Live and filling in for what we didn't get to do in Halifax. And of course, this isn't, you had, just so everybody knows, what Mary and Leanne had planned for Halifax is very different from what you're seeing today.
Yes.
It's going to be kind of a live experience of Shibden After Dark at its deepest, most emotional level. And I absolutely urge you to get your tickets early when those go on sale, because it's going to be well worth it. So I want to thank the two of you for coming. This to all of our audience, at least for now, as far as I know, unless somebody else comes forward, this is our last episode of Ann Lister Birthday Weekend Live. It has been an honor and a gas and a challenge, and probably the most fun I've had in a very long time to produce and do this. And I want to thank everybody that's appeared, Mary, Leanne, Sally, Saran, Angela, Claire, as well as, of course, Jill and Helena, and Amanda. I'm still laughing about that. It really was great that you were all able to do this with us. It meant a lot to our audience. The feedback has been absolutely spectacular. So I have a sneaking suspicion that we'll be seeing you before Halifax, because this has been so much fun. I think we'll do some more of it. But
Yeah.
So for now and tonight, God bless. Please stay safe. Stay inside. Wear your mask when you're outside. I don't want to lose one single one of you between now and next April. So please take very good care of yourselves. And with that, Mary, Leanne, thanks. Good night. Good luck to everybody.
Thanks, Pat.
We'll talk soon.